Far away from the blue planet called Earth, a dying world was breaking apart, its surface burning with rivers of fire, while the air was filled with choking dust and black smoke that swallowed the light of its red sun, and from the ruins a small shape moved fast through the darkness, a living thing that had no true body, only a twisting mass of black threads moving together like a single mind. It was called HFY by the few who had heard of it, and it was a parasite, a creature that could not live on its own but could take the bodies of others and make them its own weapons. HFY fled its home world because it was lost. The armies had fallen, the food was gone, the sky was poisoned, and the heat of the dying sun was eating the land day by day. It had no choice but to search for another place, another living body to hide in, and survive the endless hunger that was always inside it, and so it entered the cold dark of space and searched. For many long days and nights HFY drifted between stars, feeding only on the small specks of life that floated in the void, but none of them were strong enough to be a true host. It needed something bigger, something with power, something that could protect it from all the dangers waiting in the universe. Then one day HFY's senses found a world bright and alive, a world filled with countless moving shapes, a world called Earth. It fell toward this planet, hidden inside a shard of space rock, burning as it cut through the thick blue air. And when the stone crashed into a quiet forest far from human eyes, the parasite slipped free, soft and invisible as smoke, and began its hunt. It moved across the ground like a shadow, searching for the strongest creature in sight. Through the trees it found one alone, a human male walking along a narrow path with a bag on his back and eyes fixed on the ground. He was tall and strong, his step steady, and without fear. HFY's senses tasted his mind from afar and found it bright and rich with energy far greater than any animal here. This one could be the perfect host. Without waiting, HFY leapt into the air unseen like a whisper and slipped into the man, through his skin, flowing into his blood like cold fire. It reached for the brain, ready to dig its claws into the nervous system and take control, and as it settled inside it expected the usual shock, the fear, the helpless struggle of a mind being crushed, but this time there was nothing like that. Instead there was a strange stillness. The human steps did not slow, his heart did not race, there was no scream inside his thoughts, only the sound of calm breathing. And then the voice came, deep and steady, echoing through the space where the parasite now lived. "You made a mistake," the voice said quietly. HFY froze, confused. It was always the one who spoke first, it was always the one in control, but this human did not sound afraid. Instead he sounded almost amused, like a hunter watching prey walk into a trap. The parasite pushed harder, trying to seize the muscles and turn the man's legs, but they did not move the way it wanted. It tried to cloud the man's vision, but the eyes kept looking forward as if nothing had happened. Inside the mind, HFY felt something it had never felt before. Walls high and thick built around the human's thoughts. They were not natural walls, they were made of discipline, and well-shaped like armor, and behind them was a mind that seemed sharper and stronger than any HFY had ever touched. The parasite tried again, digging its threads into those walls, but as soon as it touched them, pain burned through its senses like fire, and the human's voice came again. "You really did make a mistake, and now you are mine." HFY tried to retreat deeper into the body to hide in the organs or the blood, but the human's will followed it like a shadow. Wherever it went, the body itself felt different, not just strong but trained. Every movement balanced, every breath measured. The human had full control over himself in a way that made it almost impossible for the parasite to push him aside. For the first time in many years, HFY felt something it did not want to name. It was like the memory of its dying home world, the feeling of being hunted, of being trapped. It tried to call on its instincts, the ones that had allowed it to survive for so long, but they felt dull and weak here, as if the very air inside this human's mind was choking it. The man kept walking through the forest, his steps sure, his breathing calm. He did not speak again, but HFY could feel his thoughts moving around it, pressing on it, studying it, as if deciding what to do, and in that silence the parasite realized it had chosen wrong, terribly wrong. Yet it could not escape, for once it entered a host it could not leave without killing the host, and killing the host now would mean killing itself, and so it stayed trapped in the body of a man who seemed to fear nothing. Somewhere far above the trees the clouds began to break, letting thin beams of sunlight fall onto the path. And in that light Daniel Cole finally smiled, and in that smile HFY understood that the danger here was not to the human but to itself. Inside the dark space of the human mind, the parasite named HFY moved like a storm, its black threads spreading out to every corner of thought, seeking weaknesses and cracks through which it could push itself deeper. Yet everywhere it turned it found walls, not thin weak barriers of instinct like most creatures had, but massive walls made from layers of focus and training, each wall cold and smooth without a single gap. The human named Daniel Cole kept walking through the forest outside his mind, his body moving without the parasite's control, each step solid on the ground, the air filled with the quiet sound of leaves shifting in the wind. And somewhere a bird singing, unaware of the silent battle taking place inside the man's head. Daniel's eyes moved slowly across the trees, scanning for movement, though HFY could sense there was no threat here, not yet, and that made the parasite uneasy, because this human behaved as if he was always in the middle of danger, always ready. XYRR gathered itself and slammed against the first wall with all its strength, threads twisting and stabbing like blades. Yet the wall did not break. Instead, the pain shot back into XYRR's senses like lightning, making it recoil and pull away. The human's voice came again, low and calm. "You are loud in here, too loud. You do not belong." XYRR hissed back in its own mind, voice speaking in a tongue of vibration and thought. "I will take you. I will strip your mind until nothing remains." The human's answer was simple: try. It had never been challenged like this before. On all the worlds it had fed upon, no host had been able to resist for long. The minds of warriors and leaders and hunters had all fallen in time, yet this one was different. When XYRR tried to slip between the cracks of thought, it found those cracks filled with fire. When it tried to twist the man's feelings, it found them locked away inside cold iron boxes that could not be touched. The more XYRR searched, the more it felt something strange. The human's mind was not a single open field, but a maze, each turn leading to another wall, another gate, another shadowed corridor where the parasite could not see the end. It was like being trapped in a fortress designed not only to keep intruders out, but to trap them inside and crush them slowly. Daniel's thoughts moved like a steady river, deep and controlled, yet sometimes flashes of images rose up without warning and struck XYRR with sharp force. It saw burning fields under a red sky, bodies lying in lines across the ground, men with steel eyes moving through smoke with weapons in hand. XYRR felt the echo of pain and fear, but they were not the human's own. They were memories stolen from others, taken during battle and locked away as lessons. The parasite tried to reach deeper into these visions, hoping to learn more about the man's past, but every time it stepped too close, the scene would twist into something else, a wall of black rising up like a tide, cutting the vision away. Daniel's voice would return, cold and sharp. "You do not get to see that." Frustration grew in XYRR's mind. It decided to change tactics. Instead of attacking the walls, it would attack the body. It sent its threads down the nerves toward the heart to slow it, to choke the blood flow, but the heart beat on strong and steady. As if it was ignoring the commands, XYRR pushed toward the lungs, trying to cut the breath. But the air kept moving in perfect rhythm. The human's body was not just strong, it was trained to move without the mind's normal control. The truth began to creep in like a shadow. This man had prepared himself for something like this, maybe not for a parasite exactly, but for the idea of losing control, for the risk of another mind trying to command his body. He had trained his body to listen only to his true will, and that will was locked behind the walls XYRR could not break. Outside, the forest grew darker as clouds gathered above the wind shifted, carrying a faint smell of rain. Daniel adjusted the strap on his bag with one smooth motion, his steps never slowing, the ground beneath him turning soft with damp earth. The parasite tried again to force his muscles to stop, but instead Daniel sped up, moving with purpose, as if leading XYRR somewhere. "You are not strong enough to hold me," Daniel said inside his mind, his voice like stone. XYRR snapped back, "You cannot resist forever, your mind will tire." But Daniel only answered, "I have been resisting things far worse than you for longer than you can imagine." The parasite felt something it had not felt since leaving its dying home, fear, not just fear of failing, but fear of what the human would do if he won control. The way this mind pressed in from every side, the way it studied every move XYRR made, it was not like prey, it was like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. XYRR shifted its focus to Daniel's memories again, searching for a moment of weakness, perhaps a loved one, perhaps a moment of deep pain, something that could be used as a weapon. And for a second it found a small door hidden behind one of the mental walls, a door that felt softer than the others. It reached for its sliding threads toward the latch, but before it could touch the handle, the entire space shook as if the ground itself had risen. Daniel's presence filled the air around it, his voice now sharp and dangerous: "Stay out of there." The door vanished, replaced by a wall of fire that burned through XYRR's threads, forcing it to pull back, screaming in silence. The pain, like nothing it had felt before. The human's mind was not just a fortress, it was armed with traps. Daniel continued to walk, the sound of distant thunder rolling through the forest, his eyes fixed ahead on something only he could see, and in that moment XYRR understood. It was not the hunter here, it was the prey trapped inside a cage that looked like a man's body with no clear way out. The parasite thought of escaping, but it knew the truth: leaving would mean tearing itself apart, and Daniel knew this too. "You will learn," Daniel said, "or you will be erased." XYRR spat back, "I am eternal," but the human only smiled inside his mind and said, "Then you will have plenty of time to think while I decide what to do with you." The rain began to fall, cold drops striking leaves and skin alike, the forest dimming under the weight of the storm, each drop loud in the silence between their words. The man's pace never slowing, his breathing never changing, his will unshaken. The parasite curled inside his mind like a shadow, watching, waiting, and knowing that whatever came next, this battle was far from over. XYRR thought of its kin far across the stars, wondering if any of them had ever made this mistake of choosing a host that could not be broken. And if they had it wondered if they had survived long enough to regret it. Somewhere deep in the maze of Daniel's mind a new sound began to grow, a slow steady beat like a drum calling them toward something XYRR could not yet see. It was both a warning and a promise. And so the storm outside raged and the storm inside grew darker. Two wills locked together, each waiting for the other to slip, each knowing that in this fight there could be only one master, and the question that burned in the parasite's thoughts was no longer how to take the host, but how long before the host decided to take it instead. The rain fell harder over the forest, each drop sliding down Daniel's face and soaking into his clothes, but he kept moving as if the cold and the weight of water meant nothing. His boots pressed deep into the mud, yet his steps stayed steady, each one measured and balanced, while inside his mind the parasite called XYRR moved in restless patterns, trying to understand the nature of the prison it had walked into. XYRR knew the human was not an ordinary host. It had already learned this from the walls and the traps and the voice that never trembled. Yet now the parasite began to feel there was something more, something hidden far deeper than even the fortress walls allowed it to see. It sensed a shadow in the man's mind, a part that was locked so tightly that even the air around it felt still and cold. The parasite wanted to reach it because instinct told it that whatever lay behind that shadow was the key to either victory or ruin. Daniel's voice came again, quiet but clear. You keep scratching at the wrong doors, and it will not end well for you. XYRR hissed back. I will find your weakness. Every living thing has one, and when I have it I will pull you apart. The man's tone did not change. If you dig too deep you will find something you cannot control. The parasite waited until Daniel's focus shifted outward, scanning the forest for threats, and then it slid toward the shadowed place it had sensed before, moving slowly to avoid the traps it had learned to recognize along the way. This part of the mind was colder than the rest, and the walls here were not made of stone or steel but of something darker, almost like silence shaped into form. It slipped closer, its threads brushing against the surface, and felt the faint thrum of memory hidden inside. The instant it touched the surface the vision exploded into its senses without warning. A night sky filled with black smoke, flashes of orange light tearing through the dark, the roar of engines, and the smell of burning fuel. Daniel was there, but not as the calm man walking through the rain. His face was hard and focused, his eyes locked ahead as he moved through chaos with other men at his side, each dressed in gear, heavy with weapons, their movements sharp and perfect, each gesture a sign, each step part of an unspoken plan. XYRR saw blood on the ground, heard the sharp crack of weapons cutting through the air, and felt the weight of tension pressing on every breath. Yet Daniel did not slow his mind, and the vision was as sharp as in the present. Every detail counted, every sound mapped and measured. The parasite realized this was not just any soldier, this was a man trained for operations that lived in silence, missions that did not exist on paper. The vision shifted faster than XYRR could react, the ground now white with snow, the men moving between tall shadows of broken buildings, each one silent as ghosts. Then the sound of a single breath, the flash of movement, and Daniel was already there, taking down an enemy before the man could cry out, his actions so quick that XYRR almost missed them. And then the vision began to darken, the walls of the fortress mind returning, the shadow closing in, but XYRR fought to hold the image in place, threads digging into the edges of memory, trying to pull more free. It caught one last glimpse of something stranger than the rest, a dark room with no windows, lit only by the blue glow of machines, and a figure standing before Daniel, speaking words that felt heavy even though XYRR could not hear them. The figure handed him a small object made of black metal, shaped like a coin, and in that moment the vision snapped shut. Pain lanced through the parasite's senses as the trap closed around it, the firewalls igniting again, forcing XYRR back into the central space of the mind. Daniel's voice followed like the sound of a blade sliding free. I told you to stay out of there. You are a killer, XYRR said, pushing against the pressure that still burned in its threads. You are a machine built for death, Daniel answered. I am what I needed to be, and I will be what I must be, and right now I must keep you where you belong. The parasite began to understand why the human's body and mind were so well protected. It was not only discipline but the training of someone who had lived in danger for years, who had been shaped by war and by missions where failure meant death. Daniel's life before this moment was not an ordinary human life, it was one built in the shadows of violence and control. Outside the storm began to fade, the rain slowing until it was only a soft drizzle, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and leaves. Daniel's boots now made less noise on the path, and he glanced up through the trees, his eyes catching movement far ahead, though XYRR could not see what he saw. There is more than one of you here, Daniel said, as if speaking to himself and to the parasite at once. XYRR felt the truth of his words. It could sense the faint trace of another of its kind somewhere in the distance, a signal like the heartbeat of a predator on the hunt. The parasite's instinct was to call to it to form a link and combine strength, but the human cut that thought off before it could even form in full. You will not call them here, you will lead me to them. "Why would I help you?" XYR asked with as much defiance as it could hold, because Daniel said calmly, "If they come here they will find me and I will kill them, and you will watch it happen from inside your own prison, and then you will know I can do the same to you." The forest began to thin, the trees giving way to rough hills covered in long wet grass and stones. Daniel's pace did not change, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. XYR tried once more to force his muscles to turn back, but the man's will overpowered it easily, as if swatting away a fly. The parasite thought about the black metal coin in the vision and the figure who had given it to the man. It could feel that this object was important, perhaps even connected to why Daniel could resist so strongly, but it also felt that touching that memory again would be dangerous. The traps there were not just meant to hurt, they were meant to destroy. Daniel's mind was silent now, no words given to the parasite, yet XYR could feel the quiet strength behind that silence, a weight like stone waiting for the right time to move. It knew the human was preparing for something, perhaps the meeting with the other parasite, perhaps something worse. And though it tried to tell itself that it would find a way to win, the truth was beginning to settle like cold rain. It had chosen a host it could not break, and now the only question was whether it would survive long enough to regret it. Somewhere in the distance lightning flashed across the horizon, though no thunder followed. Daniel's eyes narrowed, and he adjusted his path slightly, his steps aimed toward whatever waited beyond the hills. The parasite could sense the faint pulse of alien thought growing closer with each step, and though it should have felt relief at the presence of its own kind, all it felt now was an echo of fear. And so man and parasite moved together across the wet hills, one seeking the enemy and the other wondering if the enemy was already inside. And as the wind rose again, carrying the sharp scent of metal and rain, the fortress of Daniel's mind stayed unbroken, hiding secrets that XYR now knew it might never see, yet could never stop trying to reach. The air over the hills was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of wet stone and grass, while the wind swept in long waves that made the ground seem to move beneath Daniel's boots. Yet his pace never slowed, his eyes fixed on the faintest shapes on the horizon, shapes only he could see through the veil of rain and distance. Inside his mind, the parasite named XYR could feel it too, a pulse in the air like the slow beat of a great heart, each beat carrying the echo of thought, alien and familiar. It was one of XYR's kind, though the signal felt different, stronger in some ways, yet reckless. The parasite's instinct was to answer, to call out across the mental thread that linked their species, but before it could form the signal, Daniel's voice rose in the silence inside his mind. "You will not speak to it." The tone was calm but heavy with control, and XYR felt the command pressed down like a hand of stone. "Why not?" XYR asked with the edge of defiance. "If I reach it, we could destroy you and be free." Daniel's answer came without pause. "If you call it here, you will not be free, you will be dead." The human's mind was filled with cold certainty, and XYR understood. He believed every word he spoke. The wind grew harsher now, pulling at Daniel's jacket and carrying the thin sound of movement ahead, not the soft rustle of animals, but the sharper noise of steps placed with purpose. Daniel shifted his path toward the sound, his body moving in silence despite the uneven ground, every motion balanced as if measured by an unseen metronome. XYR tested the walls of the mind again, searching for a crack it could use to take control, but the defenses held strong even as Daniel focused on the world outside. If anything, the walls felt thicker, the traps sharper, as though the human's attention made the fortress stronger, not weaker. The parasite knew then that its usual strategy of striking when a host was distracted would not work here. Through the mist, a cluster of rocks jutted from the earth like teeth. Daniel slowed his steps, his body lowering slightly, his hands loose but ready. The other parasite was close. XYR could feel its mind now clearer than before. It was inside a host of its own, though the human body it had taken was weaker than Daniel's. The pulse of its thoughts was like the rapid beating of a drum, desperate and hungry. Daniel's voice came again, low as a whisper. "This is how it will be. You will show me where it hides, and you will help me catch it, or I will take you apart piece by piece until nothing remains." The threat was not shouted, it was spoken with the quiet weight of someone who did not bluff, and XYR found itself believing him against its own will. The human host of the other parasite appeared from behind the rocks, moving in jerks and sways as if pulled by invisible strings, the eyes glassy, the skin pale under the gray light. Daniel watched him without moving for a moment, reading the body, reading the steps. Then he began to move in a wide arc, silent as the shadow of a hawk circling its prey. XYR could feel the other parasite now fully. It reached for the mental link again, but this time Daniel allowed it, yet not to speak, only to listen. The voice that came through the link was frantic, broken by the strain of holding a failing host. It called out to XYR for aid, for union, for strength, but before XYR could answer, Daniel's mind pushed through like a blade, cutting the connection in half, leaving only silence. The moment broke when the other host turned, sensing something, though his parasite likely warned him too late. Daniel was already in motion, closing the distance in a rush that was both silent and unstoppable. The ground seemed to fold beneath him as his steps carried him faster, the rain clinging to his hair, and faced the world narrowing to the space between predator and prey. The other host tried to run, his steps uneven, his breath ragged. Daniel closed the gap in seconds, one arm locking around the man's neck, the other forcing his arm behind his back with a twist that made the joint strain. The man fought, but his movements lacked control. The parasite inside him was strong in mind but weak in body, and Daniel's training made every struggle useless. HFY felt the moment Daniel struck, not with a weapon but with his will, forcing the walls of his mind outward into the other host's thoughts through the link between parasites. The blow hit like a storm. HFY itself staggered inside the fortress as the shockwave passed. The other parasite screamed inside its own host's mind, threads tearing as Daniel's will crushed them. It tried to flee, abandoning the body, but Daniel was ready, his grip on the man's head tightening, his mind locking around the alien thought like chains of iron. The other parasite thrashed, screaming promises and curses, but it could not break free. The sound in HFY's senses was like fabric ripping slowly until the voice was gone, replaced by the hollow emptiness that meant death. The human body of the fallen host went limp. Daniel lowered it to the wet grass with a strange care, his hands checking the pulse, though HFY could tell already that the mind inside was gone. The human might live, but the alien was nothing but ash in the dark corners of thought. Daniel stood in the rain for a moment, silent, his breathing calm, his eyes scanning the horizon again, as if expecting more of them. Then his voice came back into HFY's mind. You felt that, you know what I can do to you if I choose. HFY said nothing, its threads curling in on themselves, the echo of the other parasite's end still burning through its senses. The hills stretched ahead, gray and endless. Daniel began walking again, his pace as steady as before, as if nothing had happened yet. HFY knew something had changed. The human had not only killed its kind, he had used the connection between them to strike through HFY's own senses, making the fortress not just a defense but a weapon. You will lead me to the rest, Daniel said after a while, and you will not warn them, and when they are gone you will have only me left. The words were cold but calm, and HFY felt the truth of them settle like stone in its mind. The human was not hunting blindly, he was dismantling something piece by piece, and HFY was being used as the map. The wind began to die, the rain turning to a soft mist, the world around them quiet, except for the sound of their steps. HFY thought about calling out across the stars to its kind far away, but it remembered the sharp severing of the link, the crushing force of Daniel's will, and it knew that even if it could reach them, the cost would be too high. Somewhere ahead, beyond the next line of hills, another pulse waited, faint but growing stronger with each step. Daniel's eyes lifted toward it, as if he could already see the shape it would take, and inside his mind the parasite remained silent, knowing that for now survival meant following the path of the hunter. The morning came hidden under heavy clouds, the sun only a pale blur above the gray sky, while the wind pressed low over the hills, carrying the scent of wet earth and something sharper, the faint metallic tang of danger. Daniel walked without pause, his eyes scanning every rise and hollow, while inside his mind HFY could feel the presence ahead, not faint this time but steady and strong like the slow pull of a deep current. It was another of its kind, yet different from the last, not frantic or weak but controlled with a rhythm that made HFY uneasy. Daniel felt it too, though his mind gave away nothing of his plan until he spoke quietly inside the shared space. You will guide me close enough to see it, and then you will stay silent. If you try to speak, I will know. HFY wanted to ask what he intended, but the weight in his tone silenced even the thought of defiance. The ground began to change here, the hills split into narrow valleys lined with dark stone ridges and broken earth. The wind funneled between them, carrying sounds in strange ways. A scrape could seem far, then close again. A whisper could travel like a shout. Daniel moved carefully now, his boots placing each step without sound, his breath shallow, his hands loose at his sides yet ready to move. HFY stretched its senses forward, letting the alien pulse pull at its awareness. The host of the other parasite was close and strong. The human body it had taken pulsed with power and speed. The mind inside radiated confidence. It was not hiding, it was waiting. Daniel stopped near a bend in the valley wall, his eyes moving over the stones ahead, reading shapes and shadows that to HFY looked like nothing yet. He seemed to see patterns in the way the rocks fell and the grass bent. He turned his head slightly, speaking inside his mind. They know we are coming, they are setting the ground for an ambush. The parasite inside him felt a flicker of something almost like pride. The other host was skilled. This would not be easy, yet that pride sank into unease as Daniel's thoughts sharpened into focus. Then we will give them the ambush they want, but on my terms. He moved forward again, but slower now, each step a measured piece of a silent path, his eyes flicking from stone to shadow, then to the faint marks on the earth where grass had been pressed down. The air here felt tight, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. HFY felt the pull of its kin stronger now, so close it could almost see through its senses where they waited, but the human's mind cut across the link before it could form into a message. The moment came without warning, a blur of motion from the left, a figure breaking from the rocks with speed that snapped the air. The host of the other parasite was taller, broader than Daniel, and moved like a striking animal, its body twisting in a way no normal human could move. A hand came up, gripping something long and sharp, the glint of metal catching the gray light. Daniel was already moving the instant the figure appeared, his body dropping low as the blade swept through the space where his head had been, his hand catching the attacker's wrist, twisting with a force that sent the weapon clattering against the rocks, the sound loud in the still air. The other host did not pause, it spun, using the twist to drive a knee toward Daniel's side, but the strike met only empty space as Daniel shifted with it, his foot snapping out to break the stance. HFY could feel the clash not just in the body but in the mind. The parasites inside the two hosts were aware of each other now, locked together in the same space of thought. The other one's presence was like a wave pushing hard and fast, trying to drown out all else. It spoke across the link with the sharpness of a blade. Give me control, and we will kill him together. HFY wanted to answer, wanted to merge strength, but Daniel's will was already there, cutting across the link with force that burned like. The fight in the valley turned brutal. Daniel's movements were small and sharp, each one aimed to take balance or break the flow of attack. The other host was faster in raw speed, but Daniel's timing was perfect. He waited for the smallest opening and struck with precision that turned speed into weakness. The sound of their steps and strikes echoed between the stone walls like the rhythm of a war drum. The other parasite pushed harder through its host's body, forcing unnatural bursts of strength, twisting joints past human limits, the muscles straining against themselves. Daniel absorbed each wave, redirecting the force rather than fighting it head on. HFY felt the pressure building. The other alien was stronger in raw mental energy, and if Daniel slipped even for a breath, it could overwhelm them both. Then Daniel's voice came inside his mind, calm. Even now you are going to help me finish this. HFY bristled at the command, yet the memory of the last hunt, the crushing of the previous parasite, still burned in its thoughts, so it obeyed, letting its senses open fully, letting Daniel see through them. The exact rhythm of the other parasite's push and pull, the way its energy surged before each attack. With that knowledge, Daniel shifted his approach. He began to move half a breath before the other host strikes, his counters landing in the space between thought and action, each one sharper, each one heavier. The balance of the fight began to tilt, the other host's speed turning into desperation, its movements losing the perfect rhythm that had made them dangerous. Daniel pressed the advantage, his hand catching the attacker's arm, twisting it high and driving the body into the stone wall, the impact cracking through the air. HFY felt the other parasite flare in panic, and that was when Daniel struck with his mind, not like before with walls and traps, but with a surge of force pulled from both himself and HFY. Threads of alien instinct twisted into human will. The strike tore through the link between parasite and host, cutting deep into the other mind. The scream that followed was silent, yet it shook HFY's senses, the other alien's presence shredding apart like smoke in a storm, until there was nothing but emptiness. The human body slumped forward, Daniel letting it fall gently to the wet ground, the valley silent again except for the wind. Daniel stood over the fallen host for a moment, his eyes steady, his breath calm, then he turned away and began walking without a word. HFY remained quiet too, the memory of that last strike replaying in its mind, the strange mix of human discipline and alien instinct, something neither species could create alone, yet together had become a weapon strong enough to destroy its own kind. Ahead the valley opened into a wide plain, the clouds still heavy but with faint light breaking through in thin lines. Daniel's steps carried him toward it without hesitation, his voice finally returning inside the mind. You see now why you will help me until the end, because without me you will not survive, and without you I will not find them all. The truth of it was heavy, and in the silence that followed HFY could not deny it. The wide plain stretched out under a sky of heavy clouds, the horizon flat and endless, with only the low wind to break the silence. Daniel moved across it with the same steady pace, his boots pressing into the soft wet earth, while inside his mind HFY could feel the faint pull of another signal, this one unlike any they had felt before. It was not frantic like the weak host they had faced, nor simply strong like the last. It was deep and steady, a signal that felt old and patient, the kind of presence that waited for others to come instead of hunting them. Daniel's voice came without warning inside the shared space. This one will not run, it will make us come to it, and when we do it will not hide. HFY felt a flicker of unease. The signals of its kind often carried emotion, but this one carried something else, something that felt like weight and shadow. The ground ahead shifted from grass to broken stone, the plain giving way to a stretch of cracked earth and scattered ruins half swallowed by time. Daniel's eyes moved over them, reading the shapes the way he read battlefields. Each shadow measured, each wall studied. The signal was stronger now, and HFY realized they were already inside its reach. It happened without sound. The attack came not from the ground, but from above, a figure dropping from the ruin of a tower, its body twisting in the air, landing without a sound of impact. The host was tall, lean, its movements flowing like water. The moment its feet touched the ground, it was already moving toward Daniel faster than the eye could follow. Daniel turned with the speed of instinct, his arm coming up to block the first strike, but the force behind it still drove him back across the stone. HFY felt the mind inside the other host press forward hard and sharp like a blade sliding under armor. This one knew how to fight, and it knew how to use its host to the limit. The clash that followed was faster than anything they had faced before, Daniel's body moving with precision, the other host matching him strike for strike, their steps sliding across the stone in arcs and spirals, the sound of each impact ringing in the cold air. HFY could feel the pressure building, the other parasite's mind pushing not just against its host's body but into the space where HFY and Daniel were locked together. This one spoke inside the link, its voice deep and smooth. "Join me, and I will let you live." The words carried no desperation, only certainty. HFY felt the pull of its kind, the instinct to merge and grow stronger, yet Daniel's presence cut across that pull with a force like steel. The human's thought was sharp no. The other parasite struck again, this time not with its host's limbs but with its mind, the force slamming into Daniel's mental walls so hard that even HFY staggered. The fortress shook, cracks appearing at the edges, the traps flaring with heat. Daniel held the walls in place, but the pressure was too much. The enemy's strength was greater in raw power, and if it broke through, there would be nothing to stop it from tearing them both apart. Daniel's voice came again, but now it carried something HFY had never heard in it before, not fear but urgency. "You will give me your strength, all of it now." The words hit like a command, but also like an opening. HFY hesitated, knowing what it meant. Letting a host touch the deepest part of its being meant risking control, yet the choice was already gone. The cracks in the walls were widening. "Do it," Daniel said, "or we both die." The decision took no more than a breath. HFY opened itself, letting the threads of its mind pour into Daniel's. The sensation was like cold fire running through them both, the human's thoughts expanding, the alien's instincts sharpening, until they were no longer two separate wills but one. The change was instant. The next time the other parasite struck, the force met something new, not just the cold walls of Daniel's mind, but a living barrier woven from human discipline and alien instinct. The cracks closed, the traps sharpened, the fortress became a blade, and that blade struck outward. In the physical fight, Daniel's body moved differently now, each strike heavier, faster, yet more fluid than before. His muscles seemed to carry more than human strength, his reflexes more than human speed. The other host pressed hard, but found each attack met with perfect counters, the kind that came from two minds reading the battle as one. The enemy parasite felt the shift, and its voice lost some of its calm. "What have you done?" Daniel did not answer. He drove forward, his hand locking on the other host's shoulder, his knee striking with precision, the impact breaking the stance, the follow-up a sweep that sent the enemy to the ground. But it did not end there. The enemy parasite surged again, pouring its strength into the host's body, forcing it back to its feet. In a burst of speed, Daniel met it head on, the two colliding in a blur of motion, their minds locked in a second battle just as fierce as the physical one. This time, however, the balance had changed. The merged will of Daniel and HFY pushed with equal force, meeting strength with strength and control with control. The fight turned into a storm, each strike a moment of violence and precision, the sound echoing off the broken stone, until at last Daniel caught the enemy's wrist, twisting it hard as his free hand struck the side of the host's neck. The blow dropped the body to one knee, and in that moment the merged will struck the enemy parasite directly. The force of the attack tore through its mental space like fire threads, snapping one by one, until the voice fell silent. The host's body slumped forward, the mind inside gone. Daniel stood over it, breathing steady, though HFY could feel the weight of the fight in the strain of his muscles, the merged state still holding for a few moments longer, the sensation strange and powerful, their thoughts still intertwined without walls between them. Daniel looked out across the ruins, his mind calm again, but now carrying a question. "Can you feel the rest?" HFY reached out, its senses further than it had before, the connection making them stronger, the pulses of distant minds touching the edge of awareness. "Yes. Then we hunt." Daniel said the words without emotion, but HFY felt something under them, not just the drive to fight, but the understanding that whatever they had become in this moment was not the same as before. It was more. The connection began to ease, the walls returning, but slower now, as if neither was ready to close them fully. Daniel turned and began to walk away from the fallen host, the sound of his steps steady in the empty ruins, while far ahead the next signal waited. The air was colder now, and the clouds above had turned darker, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. Daniel moved forward across a path of broken stone and dry earth, with HFY silent inside his mind. The silence was not empty, though it was the kind of silence that comes when thoughts are heavy and full of weight. Both of them could feel the pull of something ahead, not just one presence but many, their signals overlapping like a storm waiting at the edge of the horizon. Daniel's boots pressed into the dust with each step, the sound sharp in the quiet, and HFY kept its senses wide, feeling the strange rhythm of the minds ahead. These were not like the scattered hosts they had fought before. There was a pattern to them, a kind of order, as if they moved with one mind instead of many. It sent a slow chill into HFY's core, because it meant they were walking toward something that had planned for them. The ruins gave way to a wide hollow in the land, and in the center stood a structure that did not belong to the world. Around its smooth black walls rising high without any mark of time on them. Daniel stopped at the edge of the hollow, his eyes scanning the surface while inside HFY searched for weakness. There was none. The walls felt not only solid but alive, as if they were watching. The first movement came from the ground itself, thin cracks opening in the dust as figures began to rise from beneath. They were hosts, but not like the ones before. Their bodies were still, and their eyes empty, yet their movements were exact. They stepped into lines, as if answering some silent command. The moment they formed ranks, the hollow began to hum with a low vibration that sank into the bones. Daniel's hand rested on the grip of his weapon, though his focus was not on the weapon itself but on the shape of the fight ahead. He counted the lines, the distance, the angles, while HFY mapped the pulses of the parasites inside each host. There were dozens, maybe more, each one moving in perfect time, and above them all was something heavier, something larger, a signal that pressed down like weight on the air. The black walls of the structure opened in a slow sliding motion, revealing a space of pure darkness from which a figure emerged. It was taller than any host they had seen, and its movement was slow but full of certainty. The parasite inside it was not hiding at all. Its presence poured out across the hollow, filling every corner like a tide. Daniel felt it press against his mind without a word, and HFY felt it too, the sheer size of it, making every instinct scream to retreat. But Daniel's voice inside was steady. "We have seen worse," and HFY answered, "No, we have not." The figure stopped halfway down the slope of the hollow and lifted one hand in a simple motion. Every host in the lines moved at once, stepping forward with mechanical precision, their eyes still empty, their bodies moving like parts of one larger thing. The first clash came fast. Daniel met the front line head on, his body moving with the merged precision he and HFY had built in the last fight, each strike breaking a limb or dropping a host without pause. Yet for each one that fell, another stepped into place, the air filled with the dull thud of impact and the scrape of boots on stone. HFY could feel the parasites inside the fallen still alive, their signals waiting as if for permission to rise again. The large figure watched from the slope, its presence pressing harder with each moment. Then, without warning, it stepped forward and the pressure doubled. Daniel felt the edge of it against his thoughts, the push stronger than anything before. HFY felt it too, and in that moment they both knew this was not just a parasite using a host, this was a parasite that had taken its host completely. No walls, no resistance, nothing left of the original mind. The fight turned heavier, Daniel's movements still sharp, but the weight of the enemy's will was slowing him. Every strike felt like it was pushing against a tide. HFY poured more of its strength into him, but even with their merged state they could feel themselves being pushed back step by step, the hosts closing around them from all sides. Daniel's thoughts cut through the press. "We do not break, we cut through." HFY caught the meaning, and together they shifted their focus, no longer trying to hold ground. Instead they drove forward toward the slope, each strike aimed to clear a path, each step a refusal to be trapped. The hosts fell in their way, some shattering under the force, others simply pushed aside, their empty eyes never blinking. The figure on the slope moved again, its pace slow but certain. It did not rush because it did not need to. Every step it took seemed to pull the air tighter until Daniel and HFY reached the base of the slope and finally stood before it, the distance between them and the figure no more than 3 paces. Its voice came then, deep and layered, not in sound but in thought. "You are not like the others, human. You carry one of mine, yet you are still yourself. It is a mistake that will not remain." Daniel's answer was simple, "Not yours," and with that he struck. The figure caught the blow with one hand, the force running up its arm without moving its stance. Its own strike came in return, a single step and a punch that sent Daniel sliding back across the stone. HFY held the connection firm, keeping their minds steady. Even as the shock rippled through them both, they pushed forward again, striking in unison. The fight at this range, a storm of force and speed. For a moment it seemed they were holding, but then the parasites will press deeper, slipping along the edges of their merged thoughts, looking for cracks. HFY felt the probe and tightened its hold, yet Daniel's mind was not a closed fortress now. It was a shifting space where human thought and alien instinct wove together. The parasite's probe found no gap because the shape kept changing faster than it could follow. Daniel's strikes began to land harder, the merged state adapting in real time, each move shifting before the enemy could counter. For the first time, the large figure stepped back, its eyes narrowing though its mind still pressed down heavy. The hosts in the hollow began to stir again, their lines breaking as they moved to close in, but Daniel's focus stayed on the figure before him. The last exchange was brutal. Daniel's knee caught the host's side, his elbow followed into its jaw, and HFY struck with its mind. At the same moment, the combined force breaking through the parasite's focus just enough to drive it back a second step. It was not defeat, but it was not victory either. The figure stilled its presence, pulling back slightly, its voice once more in thought, "You will not stop. What comes this world is already ours, and others will follow." Then it stepped back into the darkness of the open wall, the black surface closing without a sound. The hosts around the hollow froze, then one by one they fell still, their empty eyes staring at nothing. Daniel stood in the center, his breath steady, though HFY could feel the deep burn of strain inside him. They both knew the fight was not over. The parasite had not been defeated, only delayed. Daniel turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the signals of other minds now glimmered, faint but real. The storm was moving not toward them, but across the world. HFY spoke inside, "We cannot fight them all," and Daniel's reply came cold and sure, "We do not need to fight them all, we just need to make them afraid." And with that, they began to walk away from the hollow, their steps steady under the darkening sky, while far behind the black walls stood silent, watching, waiting, knowing this was only the beginning.